Now we turn the conversation to politics, to the elections. Now, I want you to picture a scenario. A governor has been declared victorious on the ballot sheet, goes ahead to have an inauguration. He or she does appointments, forms a cabinet, and hits the ground running. Now, months later, wait a minute, you're no longer the governor. And that's because some governors in the past and even recently have become victorious in the court. Now, what does this say about INEC? What does this say about our electoral system? And what does it say about managing resources? A lot of resources, a lot of questions. Now, joining me, I have a public affairs analyst in the person of Seun Awogbinle. Seun, welcome to Rubbing Minds.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it's good to see you again.
Good to have you on the program. Now, just recently, a three-member panel in a unanimous decision on Sunday ruled that the Plateau State governor, that's Caleb Mutfwang, was not validly sponsored by the PDP. So this is coming as the fourth governor to receive such a result. What does that mean? What does that say about our electoral processes? What does it say about INEC and the sanctity of the elections?
Well, I think it's important to actually acknowledge the progress that we've made as a nation. I like to think of nation building as an eternal endeavor. And more so is the fact that you say, for some people, they will describe 60 years as as a short lifespan in the life of the nation. What has to be considered, if you compare it to, to a human being, you most likely will say it's a retirement age. But it's actually important because on the backdrop of the fact that in 2003, it took almost 2 years. Then Muhammadu Buhari against Olusegun Obasanjo just took almost 2 years to eventually dispense with the case in court until it got to the Supreme Court. It was dispensed in, I think, 2005. In 2007, Muhammadu Buhari and Atiku Abubakar against Maru Musa Yar'Adua took another 2 years to dispense with. But you have a situation in which now it takes about 100 plus 60 days. That's a total of 240 days to dispense with presidential election petition in Nigeria. And it takes 180 plus 60 to dispense with a governorship petition.
So I hear you, Seun, on speed, that what we're recording as progress is the speed in which we're getting judgments. But should we be in this situation? Isn't the electoral cycle enough to declare a valid winner? As a governor, do you sit firmly on that seat, or you have to wait with your heart in your mouth for the courts to rule whether you are truly victorious or not? And what about the wastage that we incur within those 160 or 180 days?
So, I'm actually getting there, and I'm getting there because, it's a functionality of the law. So we have actually had revisions of the electoral law. We had a revision in 2011. We had another revision in 2022. So essentially, it is a provision of the law. And why I've said this is because it then opens, some of the developments that we have now seen opens up a completely new dynamics for election management in Nigeria. So, I'm sure that all the people in the National Assembly have equally seen this. And most of them are beginning to mute the idea about why it is important for us to dispense with election petition before, public servants are actually sworn in Nigeria. But I also quite agree because, first of all, when you have a situation like this, one, it creates mistrust. It becomes very difficult for the petitioner to actually get justice, especially when you are competing against your opponent who already has access to the apparatus of power. Secondly, you also create a situation where it becomes very expensive. The case of Plateau that I have cited is a very, very valuable example. So, if not all the senators in Plateau have been sacked, most of the House of Assembly, most of the House of Reps. And today I was reading about how there are 16 members of the House of Assembly have equally been sacked. Don't forget that these people have been earning salaries between May and this time. So you create a situation where it becomes very expensive. You're not likely to ask them to refund the money. So you're not likely to swear in another set of people who are likely going to go through trainings. They're going to go through onboarding and the rest of them. So it's actually very expensive. And then you also create what you call political instability. And I've always argued that political stability is a major requirement for foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, and capital inflows. So you are not likely to get capital into an economy that is completely unstable, especially when it is politically unstable. So it becomes also very challenging because we need all the investment that we can get at this time. So it's not healthy for business, it's not healthy for investment, it's equally not healthy for trade because a new president or a new governor would likely come with a completely new ideology. So you have a president who is more liberal in his approach to governance. But don't forget that we had a former president, Muhammadu Buhari, who was a little more conservative and had restrictive trade policies. So it's also about ideology. So you also create political instability even for the business climate and also for investment climate. Then you also have a situation where politicians can entirely become, even not reckless, relying on technicalities in court to be able to subvert the will of the people.
So sorry to just jump in there. Sorry, I want to build on what you're saying. Do you think that some politicians go into that race with the mindset that I'm going to exploit those technicalities and I'm going to become victorious in court? Is that now a strategy because of the provisions of the law?
Absolutely, I agree completely. You have a situation in which, some politicians, in fact, go into election believing that they can actually rely on technicality, and it's becoming an entire charade and circus because people want to win via the courts. They no longer want to win via the ballots because they consider themselves, possibly unpopular. So, but it can also be depressing for electorates who believe that sometimes their votes might not count and that the courts would have to decide for them. And we cannot relegate the Nigeria's election to, I'm sorry, but to what you most likely would call a group of judges, who are likely going to sit in court 5 or 7 and then decide the fate of, say, for example, in the case of Nigeria, a case of 220 million people. We have to get to a point where, the elections, the sanctity of the elections and the votes of the people would actually count, beyond technicalities. So I do agree that it has actually opened a new dynamics for election management in the country, and that we can get to the point where election petition can at least be dispensed with before you swear in, a governor, a president, or even members of the National Assembly or even state assemblies. It becomes very healthy. But like I've said, the work of nation building is not a destination. It is a journey, and we are likely to get there. And I think that the National Assembly they are equally seeing those challenges, and they might and should rise up to that occasion.
What are your expectations of INEC in all of this? Because the body language is that, and from the reports that have been received, that they performed well during these elections. But if the population or the populace believes that, oh, my votes don't count because someone else is going to be declared winner through the court system, then is INEC doing enough? And then I also would like you to comment on the disruption to the electoral cycle. So we see that while the general elections and the gubernatorial elections are happening on certain days, then months later, all of a sudden, INEC is busy with just one state's elections.
Well, I think that this has less to do with INEC, to be honest, because INEC does not make the law. Members of the National Assembly make the law. So the laws actually emanate from the legislature. And don't also forget that in the process of making a law, you are likely to have what you call public hearing. So we all have input. In fact, the last electoral amendment in 2022, we all had input, especially from members of civil society, which I was also, a fundamental part of. So we all had input, and that's why I'm saying that it's not a journey. I mean, it's not a destination; it's a journey. And when we're all making input into the 2022 electoral amendment, most people do not envisage a situation where we are likely to have people who are entirely relying on technicalities of the court to be able to grab power. But now it has become an obvious reality, right? It's obvious at this point, and I think that whatever we have to do now, whatever amendment we have to do must be targeted in that direction. Also, whatever INEC has done, their only requirement is to go to court to actually defend it. So INEC did not make it takes 180 days for an election tribunal to dispense with their court. It takes 60 days for the Court of Appeal in the case of a governor, and it takes 60 days for the Supreme Court in the case of the governor as well. So INEC didn't make the law. So I don't think that INEC has a lot to do. INEC must only abide by one. So you have when we actually have a situation where the law has been revised, so you might likely have elections holding way before time to provide enough time for the pre and post election petition to be speedily dispensed with. Right, so that's the only challenge that I see here. But I don't think that we're likely to have any situation where INEC has anything to essentially talk about. INEC is only going to be abiding by whatever the court has decided, and that's it.
So as a voter, how confident are you in the election process when you know that technicalities can be exploited? At the end of the day, if Nigerians see that whoever is voted in doesn't always end up in power, then there's likely to be low voter turnout and voter apathy, where people don't believe in the process anymore, and it's the highest bidder who can pay the best lawyers or even get the judiciary roped in.
Well, there's even till now, there's nothing that is shaking my faith about about Nigeria. To be honest, I think like I started during my introduction, I think that it is important for us to believe that elections and democracy is a journey. It's not a destination, and we must trust that Nigerians continue to make progress, substantial progress even. And things get better over time. 60 years, 63 years now, might be a lot in the life, in the life of an individual, but in the life of a nation, you are likely to describe Nigeria as a baby nation. Although some would even say that, what about, nations who are equally just around the same, age as Nigeria? But, some children are still learners. I'm sure we would all agree with that. There is nothing, that's shaking my faith. My faith in the electoral process remains unshaken. And I believe that what we all have to do is to continue to trust the process. It gets better with time. And that's why we have actually elected people to go and do the jobs. Now, the work that we all have to do is to begin to engage members of the parliament to tell them the new direction, what we consider the new direction in terms of election management for the country. And that's what we all have to do. Nigeria is not likely to get better, over time. Nigeria is not likely to get better overnight. It is going to be a continuous and deliberate work of progress. We all have a work to do. We all have to continue to trust in that process.
When you say we all have work to do, for the voter that's watching now, what can they do to engage the legislature to ensure that these electoral laws are reviewed in time for, say, the next elections and this wastage is curbed? What can be done to ensure that there's less wastage even as we anticipate the review of these electoral laws?
There's nothing we really can do. The law is the law. At the moment, those who are likely to exploit the law currently, it's their victory. Although it's unfortunate, but there's nothing we can do. And that's what democracy is all about. Sometimes democracy might not go the way we want it, but it's still democracy. And don't forget that one of the most important things that I personally enjoy about democracy is the fact that it is self-correcting. Right? Democracy does correct itself over time. I gave you an analogy painting the scenario of what we had in 2003 and, what we had in 2007 and what we now have in 2023, where election petitions are speedily dispensed with. So, and that's taking us almost 20 years to get here. But I'm sure that how far that we have to travel is not as much as how much we have already traveled. We have to continue to consolidate what we already have. We have to continue to consolidate our democratic ideals. And I think it's even commendable, for most of politicians and public servants, or let me say, for aspirants who ran the last election, that everybody now believes in the power of the courts to seek redress, and nobody's taking laws into their hands. And I think that's a fine point. That's a very fine improvement that we have also witnessed. Before now, you are likely to have political violence. You're likely to have violence as a result of political outcomes. But you now have a situation where the language of politicians are measured politicians continue to mistake, even those, for example, in the case of presidential election petition, I mean, you have to commend the opposition candidates. Even though the outcome did not go their way, they continue to reiterate their confidence, their maximum belief in democracy, and that's what we all have to do. And I like that they continue to encourage their followers to believe in the power of democracy. And interestingly, if you might, I mean, someone I think was President Tinubu who said, if you have not tasted the defeat, you most likely will not understand the joy of victory. I give an example of for the presidential aspirant Peter Obi, who essentially benefited. In fact, what you call by-elections in Nigeria, the governorship off-cycle elections started with, what's it called, former Governor Peter Obi in 2007, who went to court and eventually got his mandate, right? And essentially, I mean, he won at the court. In fact, when he was in fact impeached by the Anambra State House of Assembly, he went back to court and court still restated it. And that's the thing, you may have lost out, so you win some, you lose some, just like in the case of football. So I think that's what we must continue to preach, which is that it's not a winner take all. Sometimes you win some, you lose some, but we must have faith in democracy, must continue to abide. But like I said, what we have currently is to understand that the new work that we all have to do is to see that we're able to amend our laws and we're able to review our laws to ensure that before people take reins of power, the election petition are speedily dispensed with. So possibly it might require us to hold elections a lot more earlier, and then we can have enough time to immediately. But that also opens up another conversation about the welfare of judges. The last time we were talking about how that we need to constitute that the Supreme Court is short of justice. So you have a situation where even in that kind of situation, you need to actually ensure that you take care of judicial officers, and then you probably might have to even expand where necessary. So essentially, it's a layered conversation. It's not a one size fits all, but. The point I think is important to reiterate is that the law is the law, really, regardless of how we feel. Our emotions don't make the law. The laws are essentially they're cast in stone. Justices or judges also just have to interpret the law. Everybody just, and by the way, we all make the law. The people we send to the parliament make the law. So if we made a law in 2010 that no longer serves us, by the way. I
want to jump in here. It has to do with the judiciary. So while we wait for things to get better with the judiciary in terms of compensation, in terms of ensuring that we have more judges at the Supreme Court, a lot of Nigerians don't have faith in the judiciary. And some believe that the judiciary is up for sale to the highest bidder. How can we correct that notion?
Oh, no, it's not for me to correct. I think the notion is completely uninformed. It is misguided. And I think that it's unhelpful for anyone to believe in such notion. So I don't even think it's something we should even parrot. I don't think it's something we should parrot on the platform like this one.
All right, sure. We'll have to bring the conversation.
No,
okay, you can just finish that.
I think that judges... Yeah, I think that judges and justices are people that should be quite reasonably beyond reproach, right? And I think that, if you have a situation, for example, let's talk about
unfortunately, we're out of time to go further in this conversation, but thank you for your contribution, Seun Awogbenle. We'll be taking a quick break. Thank you very much for being on the show here on Rubbing Minds.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's good to see you again.
And just give me some reaction. Just